Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you guys doing? This video is a response to a joke, a supposed joke that a comedian made about the Christchurch event which took place last year, whereby 52 people were horrifically and monstrously killed in their place of worship. Let's hear the joke and let's hear the justification for the joke.
This Australian extremist stormed this building, this mosque, this room where people were saying their prayers and going about their business. And for me, the saddest thing about that, it wasn't the 52 people who were killed. It wasn't the countless others who had their lives changed forever because their family members were taken from them. It was the hundreds of people that night who couldn't make it home from nightclubs in Christchurch because all the cabbies were dead.
So in trying to defend his views, this comedian has come out with a range of arguments, really, of justification. So let's hear the first one.
Key word there is, it is a joke. It is not real. It is make-believe. I don't really feel like that, but that is what comedy is.
What I've got here is the dictionary definition of what it is to be a joke. Is something such as a funny story or trick. This is Cambridge Dictionary. That is said or done in order to make people laugh. Your criteria of the joke having to be something which is, or assumed to be something which is fictitious or make-believe, is not something which is indicated with the dictionary definition. I've looked at more than one dictionary definition. So why is it that you want us to assume that a joke is something which is make-believe, fictitious, or doesn't correspond with what you believe in? Doesn't make sense. It's not in line with the definitions I have. So the problem with this joke is not just the fact that you trivialized or minimized the plight of the 52 people that were killed in cold blood. Yes, and the families of those individuals who are also grieving and probably still grieving at this moment at such a horrific and monstrous event in the history of the world. It's not just this fact, but it's the fact that you homogenized this group of Muslim people as if they are one ethnic group, all of which have one occupation, a singular occupation, which is what? Taxi driving. Taxi driving. When in fact Islam and Muslims are a diverse group of individuals, and the people who died were different genders and different ages. Let's be frank. You might be saying, oh, this is pedantic, it's a joke. No, sorry, this does not work with me. It does not work with me because the word joke here, yeah, and what it means to be a joke is not this, what you try to put forward and fool your audiences with. It's not that. So having said this now, not only is that the case, but you made it as if those individuals who are now homogenized and otherized, yeah, those Muslims who are the taxi drivers, have the sole job of taking people away taking people home from nightclubs, living a liberal lifestyle, a non-Islamic lifestyle. So here the point is this, is that not only have you homogenized and otherized the Muslims, but you have made them the servant class, the slave class, whose job it is to facilitate the liberal lifestyles of those people who are enjoying themselves in clubs and pubs out on that night. And that is for you the tragedy. Now you might be saying, it's not what I actually believe, it's a lie, it's make-believe, but that's not what it is to be a joke. And we're going to explain why your sacred values, and I use those words clearly, of freedom of speech, absolutism, is in fact flawed in what follows.
But we laugh about horrible things all the time. It's how people deal with tragedy.
And he even says in another part of his video that he himself made a joke about the Holocaust and about 9/11. It's not about you, a white man here that lives in Australia, making a joke about 9/11 or this or that. It's about, imagine if a Muslim, yeah, a practicing traditionalist Muslim, had made a joke about 9/11. That's the comparison. The comparison is, imagine if a traditionalist Muslim who is clearly visibly practicing his religion, yeah, made a joke about 9. That is the correct kind of comparison. Then how would the public, the American public, react to that? And would they have a right to react angrily to that? That's the question. It's not about whether you, as a white man who has no connection to Islam or Muslims, yeah, make a joke about 9/11 or the Holocaust. It's about whether Muslims make that joke, visibly traditionalist practicing Muslims make that joke, yeah, and whether there could be or would be a response, which I'm pretty sure there would be, in England or USA or whatever it is.
It is just laughing at horrible things, and I understand why you're offended, because I'm offended by it too. That is the point.
This is problematic because in the beginning of this whole video, you were showing us screenshots of people abusing you online, cyberbullying. So if you really thought that being offended should not be the criteria for people saying or not saying some things, why are you even showing us the abuse that you suffered? Why are you even showing us that? If you really thought that this was the case, why are you showing us the fact that these people were saying mean-spirited things to you online? Who cares if you felt offended by that? So really, it's one standard for yourself, but another standard for the community, which you think is a disposable one, which I think you're learning is not, which is the Muslim community.
If you treat me with respect, I will treat you with that same respect.
And then at minute 5:40, you talk about respect. As if we're going to really listen to you. Yeah, it's really, let's be real. I mean, that's the joke. Do you want to make a joke? You want to make a joke? Yeah? That's the joke. That you are going to start talking to us about after all you've done about respect. What is the definition of the word respect? It's due regard. One of the definitions is due regard for people's feelings. So if you have respect for me, you were talking about reciprocity and respect. That if you have respect for me, I'll have respect for you and vice versa and so on. But what if we're telling you, right, that what you're doing is disrespectful and you continue saying, I'm going to do it. So is that respectful? According to what respect actually means. So you seem to be a contradictory man. A contradictory man. A man who hasn't got his morality figured out. This is the problem. Intellectually, you're bankrupt. You're morally bankrupt. You have no sense of direction when it comes to what can I say and what can I not say.
I genuinely believe that everything is okay.
Which means you're a free speech absolutist. But society, even liberal thinkers, okay, liberal thinkers who argued the case for freedom of speech, they would restrict and censor freedom of speech as per the harm principle on certain occasions. For example, plagiarism, copyright, leaking industrial secrets of government, for example, military secrets. These are all examples of, I'm sure if someone took your video and put it on their YouTube channel, you wouldn't like that. And you might even say, you know what, this is not the kind of freedom of speech. Yes, I accept, because this is copyright and plagiarism. Otherwise, you should make a video explaining to everyone that you allow your content on their channels. You should do this if you are truly a free speech absolutist. But you'll say, no, it's copyright and plagiarism and so on and so forth. And if that is the case, and if that is your position, then you realize that there is a need, a practical need, yes, a practical need for some kinds of censorship. So if you realize that there is a practical need for some kinds of censorship in order for economy and society to move forward, the question is, who sets the parameters for such need? Where does it become inappropriate or otherwise immoral for certain things to be said or not to be said? And what the contradictory set of propositions you're putting forward is,
there is nothing sacred, and that is the way that comedy should be.
But the irony, the mother of all ironies, is the following, is that for you, comedy is sacred. And not only is comedy sacred, but free speech is sacred as well. You're saying nothing is sacred, but you actually are upholding a sacred principle. In fact, you could even argue, depending on how you define religion, a religious principle. Yes, that free speech should be upheld, which is, in my understanding of it, a sacred principle. Don't make yourself out to be a neutralist when it comes to free speech and so on and so forth. You do prioritize and hierarchize. Yes, you do that. A set of moral propositions over and above other moral propositions. So don't say nothing is sacred, because clearly you're upholding free speech absolutism as a sacred morality. And not only that, but comedy itself is sacred for you. So much so that you allow things to be said in the name of comedy that you would never probably allow to be said in other contexts. For example, copyright, libel, defamation of character, and so on and so forth. My question is, how do you make such distinction on your moral philosophy? How do you make such a distinction? How can you prove that on the one hand, yeah, if you take functionalism out of the picture, how can you prove that it's immoral to plagiarize and defame? And on the other hand, yes, on the other hand, it's okay to say whatever you want in the name of comedy. The problem here is you actually do have a God. You do have a God. You do have a religion. Don't make yourself out to be some neutralist or some agnostic in this sense. No, your religion is the religion of liberalism, and more particularly, free speech absolutism. That's your religion. That's what's sacred to you. Okay? So having said that now, nothing is sacred would make no sense at all.
Particularly the Muslim people who think I'm a horrible piece of shit. You want to see me burn?
Well, who said that? Some Muslims, you see, this is the problem. Hasty generalizations. Muslims, according to Pew, by the end of the century will be one of every 3 people on planet Earth demographic. 1 of every 3 people, 1/3 of the planet will be Muslim. I don't think you've done a referendum, yes, on 1.8 billion people. And in fact, the Quran itself says in chapter 4, verse 147, ما يفعل الله بعذابكم إن شكرتم وآمنتم وكان الله شاكرا عليما. That what would Allah benefit? What would God benefit with your punishment if you are thankful and you believe? And God is ever thankful, all knowledgeable. Chapter 4, verse 147. In fact, if Muslims are doing what Islam says, or what the Quran says in particular, they shouldn't want you to be burned at all. Muslims should, yes, according to the Quranic discourse, want the best for you. And in fact, that's what I'll say to you. We don't want you to go to hell. In fact, the opposite is true. We don't want anybody to be burnt or go to hell or have a demise in the afterlife which is eternally excruciating. We don't want that to happen to you. In fact, we want you to have a pleasurable, eternal life of goodness. And that's why we invite you to Islam. We invite you to believing in one God. As the Quran says, in shakartum wa amantum, to be thankful and grateful. To be thankful and grateful to God and to believe in God. And with that, you'll have the ultimate purpose of life realized. The ultimate purpose of life, which is not to make other people laugh. That's not the purpose of life. I'm not saying you shouldn't or you couldn't. You can do that as well. It's a subsidiary thing. But the crux of the basic human function is to believe in one God, to worship one God. Yeah? For the sake of knowing your purpose, having a happy life, having welfare in this world and in the next world. We don't believe that you're just going to turn into ashes and that will be the end of the human experience. So it's something you should look into. And I invite you to look into that. And in fact, I'm happy to have a conversation with you and bring you onto my podcast, the MH podcast, where we can have a conversation, a religious conversation, a political conversation, a philosophical conversation about these things, free speech, about religion, about what you actually meant. And in that way, perhaps the Muslim community can look past your ignorance towards them. And perhaps we, as humanity, can move forward together, hand in hand, not offending one another. And as you said, in theory, respecting one another, but also in practice, implementing such respect to one another. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.